The story starts in Japan, and we see a girl named Nishino, who was still sleeping in her bed. She woke up and she went into the bathroom. After showering, she looked in the mirror and was very nervous because she was going back to school after a terrible incident with a stalker. She got dressed, and when she opened the door she was scared for a moment. She realized that everything is fine and she was driven to her school. When she arrived at school, Nishino got out, and all the students greeted her. Suddenly she met the only person in school who she despised. The reason for this was that Minoru always mispronounced her name. He apologized and said that he usually knows the names of all main characters in school. Then he made another attempt to say her name, but he mispronounced her name again. Meanwhile, Nishino noted that he had never really looked into her eyes, and she hated Minoru. Following this, she was praised by her classmates because she was a celebrity, and she tried to ignore Minoru. Later, Nishino went to the bathroom to calm herself down because she was kidnapped by a stalker in middle school. Since then, she has been hiding behind a mask. Then class started and Nishino was the best student in the class, who was loved by everyone. She played the teacher's pet and was nice to everyone so that no one would hate her. Suddenly, she heard beautiful piano sounds coming from outside the school building into her classroom. This is how we learn that Minoru Kagenu was responsible for the sounds. He played the piano and the other students went home. In the evening, Nishino called her driver and asked him to pick her up at school. Unfortunately, he was seriously injured by criminals. As a result, Nishino decided to walk home alone, and Minoru saw that she wasn't picked up by her driver. She realized that she hadn't been walking home alone since the incident. Suddenly she heard a noise, and a scary man who had been looking for her showed up. She tried to run away, but a car blocked her path. So she was captured, and the men planned to kidnap her. At the last moment, she saw Minoru, and she fainted out. A few hours later, she woke up and she wondered where she was. The kidnappers said she should wait until her father paid the ransom. Meanwhile, one of the kidnappers was talking too much, and they started arguing with each other. Then we see Minoru, and he was ready to fight against the criminals. In the meantime, one of the kidnappers told Nishino that he likes her body. He said that he will make with her a baby, and he tried to force her to pick up a soap. In that moment, she remembered the day when a stalker kidnapped her and did naughty things with her body. Suddenly they heard a noise on the roof and the kidnapper was scared. Minoru entered the building and he intended to punish the villains. He introduced himself and called himself Stylish Ruffian Slayer. The criminal tried to shoot Minoru with his pistol, but he threw a knife at him. So one of the kidnappers was defeated and his partner was impressed by the Stylish Ruffian Slayer. The opponent said he was bored since he was discharged from the army. Then Minoru said that he always wanted to fight a soldier and they started fighting. The criminal managed to injure Minoru and he tried to kill Minoru. At the last moment, Minoru parried his attack and he said that crowbars are more useful than a knife. He explained to the ex-army soldier that he could use his weapon as a tonfa. Suddenly his enemy changed his fighting style and he said that Minoru has a weakness that he exploited. Then, Minoru realized he couldn't play anymore and he decided to get serious. He knew that crowbars had a lot of potential to defeat enemies because he used it to beat up many motorcycle gangs. When the criminal found out about the story, he remembered about a guy who hunted gangs every night. Following this, the ex-soldier ran for his pistol, but Minoru prevented it, and he showed his opponent the true potential of a crowbar. He defeated his enemies and broke all their bones until they lost consciousness. After that, he went to Nishino, and he took a knife. He freed her, and told her to be more careful on the way home next time. Suddenly, he disappeared, and Nishino wondered where the masked hero disappeared to. Later the police were called and the identity of the mysterious hero remained hidden. In the following morning, Nishino went to school and she ran into Minoru again. He remembered her name, and she was surprised that he was looking into her eyes for the first time. A few days later, it was reported that high school student Minoru died by a truck accident. We then learned that Minoru had dreamed of being a hero since he was a child. He realized that his childhood dream was not a temporary phase. Unfortunately, in his world there was a limit to what humans could do. He knew that he could defeat many soldiers with martial arts, but he knew that he never had a chance against a nuclear bomb. As a result, he desired power that would allow him to overcome the limit to surpass nuclear bombs. Then we see him in another world, and he had a group full of girls serving him. They all waited for his command, and he was happy that he was blessed with a new life. He also received magical power that allowed him to overcome impossible limits. So he began his story with magical power, and he strived for a life as a hero who acts in the shadows like DC hero Batman, As a result, he became the strongest hero called Eminence of Shadow. Then we see the day that Shadow's story began. He told a cute girl about the villains called the Diablos cult. She confirmed that the organization was dangerous, and that day they decided to hunt down the enemies from the shadows. Following this, we see Minoru as he was reincarnated in a new family. He was reborn in a world full of magic, and his name was Sheed. He didn't know what happened, but he accepted his new fate. However, a few years passed and Sheed was born into a family of Black Knights. Everyone had high hopes for the Kage heir, who was his big sister. The reason was that Sheed didn't reveal his talent and lived an ordinary life. But at night he fought criminals like Batman, and he showed his opponents his true power. Sheed created a slime that he wanted to test on criminals. Suddenly he realized that he had killed everyone, and he planned to test his new weapon on the leader of the bandits. So he attacked the leader of the bandits who tried to kill him. Then he let his enemy hit him, but he wasn't hurt at all and killed his opponent immediately. Following this, his experiment was complete, and he confiscated all of their stolen money. Later he heard a noise and discovered a disgusting slime monster. He sensed that the creature was being overloaded with magic. He decided to carry out experiments on the slime monster and took him with him. In the weeks that followed, Sheed played with the slime monster, and he released the magic. As a result, the slime monster transformed back into a pretty girl. He was surprised by the result of his experiment, and laid the girl on the ground. Before she woke up, Sheed planned to make his first appearance as Eminence of Shadow. Then Sheed said that he broke her curse and she is now free. He told her that a terrible curse had been cast on her and other heroes' descendants. This is how the elf girl found out about the defeated demon, Diablos. Unfortunately, the girl asked too many questions, and Sheed invented the story of the cult of Diablos. He then said that his main mission is to destroy the cult of Diablos. He introduced himself as Shadow, who hunts down criminals in the shadows. Afterwards, the girl said that she had lost everything. Suddenly, she said that they will find the other hero descendants to strengthen their organization. Following this, she had decided to name his organization Shadow Garden, and he named the girl Alpha. 3 years later, she had trained with his big sister. He hid his true talent, and he was able to defeat his sister with ease. But he pretended that he was weak and fell into the river. Additionally, he complained that his sister was too strong. In the days that followed, Claire was enrolled to the Black Knight Academy of Midgar. Unfortunately, she was kidnapped, and their parents were worried about her. They started arguing, and Sheed's mother became angry and ordered her husband to find his daughter. Meanwhile, he asked Beta where Alpha was, and he learned that they had already found traces of Claire. Then Sheed threw a knife at the map and he missed, but Beta believed his lie. Despite everything, Beta found his sister's hiding place, and he acted as if everything was planned. He said that he already knew about the secret place of their enemies and went off. Following this, we see Claire and Viscount Grease attacked her. He was impressed that she was able to dodge his attacks, and she said that her brother taught her everything. She also said that she always learned something from her brother in battle, and the Viscount was interested in Claire's brother. Suddenly Claire became angry and tried to kill Viscount Grease because he planned to kidnap Sheed. Then it was reported to him that 7 people appeared and defeated all of their soldiers. Viscount Grease immediately ran to the entrance, and he was shocked that his commander died. Then Alpha said they are Shadow Garden, and she told him that they will destroy the cult of Diablos. Viscount Grease was shocked that she had heard about his organization, and he attacked Alpha. Unfortunately, Alpha was stronger than him, and she blocked all of his attacks. Viscount Grease decided to take magical steroids, and he got a power-up. Then he managed to push Alpha back, and he took advantage of the opportunities to escape. Alpha told the other girls that they don't need to chase him because Shadow will finish him off. Meanwhile, Shadow was underground in the hideout, and he realized he was lost. Afterwards, Viscount Grease appeared, and he was shocked to see one of the enemies. He attacked Shadow, but he deflected his attack with ease. So Shadow said that although he has more magical power than Alpha, he is much weaker than her. Then Shadow began to show his power difference. He played with Viscount Grease and attacked him with strong sword blows that seriously injured him. At that moment, his opponent realized that he had no chance against Shadow. Then he said that the darkness is darker than he can imagine, and Shadow started to smile. After that, Viscount Grease transformed into a strong monster that doubled his physical strength. He attacked Shadow, but he dodged all of his attacks. Suddenly, he began to prepare for his final blow against his enemy. As a result, he slashed his opponent and said that playtime was over. Viscount Grease lost his battle, and he saw hope in Shadow. After the fight, Shadow found Viscount Grease's pendant and he went home. The following day, Claire returned home and Sheed said goodbye to his sister, who was sent to the Magic Academy. In the evening, he enjoyed the sunset, but Alpha had bad news for him. She said that they will leave him, and he was shocked by her words. Several months have passed since the day the girls left Sheed. They said that they must fight against the cult of Diablos all over the world. Unfortunately, Sheed misunderstood their words and thought that they were all grown up. So he thought that they had decided not to play with him anymore, but he wasn't mad at the girls. Then Sheed remembered when in his old life he wished for magic and he was hit by a truck. Following this, he decided to continue being the Eminence of Shadow even if he doesn't have a team. When he arrived in the royal capital of the Midgar Kingdom, he looked around the city. He was 15 years old and was forced to go to the Midgar Black Knight Academy. Furthermore, Sheed thought that he was a background character, and he acted like one in order to lead a normal life. Then he went to school with his friends Hiyoro and Johnny. On the train, Hiyoro complained that they weren't allowed to live in the dorms on campus like the upper kids. Meanwhile, Sheed was proud that he behaved perfectly like a background character, and his friends forced him to confess his love to a girl. He was willing to be dumped, because that's the typical life of a background character. Then they went to school, and they saw that a boy was dumped by Princess Alexia when he confessed his love. Suddenly his friends wished him good luck, and he practiced to get the perfect background character performance. In the evening, Sheed began to blush in front of her, and he confessed his love to Princess Alexia. He behaved like a weirdo, and he was proud of his embarrassing performance. Unfortunately, she accepted his confession of love, and Sheed was confused that she agreed to the relationship. The following day, all students found out that Alexia was in a relationship with an ordinary guy. They showed him all their side eyes, and his friends were jealous that he got a girlfriend. Sheed didn't want to have a relationship at all, and Alexia showed up. Suddenly she was sitting next to Sheed, and she was being served royal dishes at lunch. She said she could never finish everything, and Sheed offered to help her finish all the dishes. So he behaved rudely to get her to break up with him, but she asked him to study royal Bushin fencing with her. He couldn't refuse her offer, and he accepted to go to the same class with her. Sheed was later allowed to train in the higher fencing class, and he was aware that Mr. Zenon was a very capable instructor. Then he was introduced, and Zenon wondered how strong the new student was. A short time later, class began, and Sheed analyzed Alexia's fighting techniques. He noticed that she makes very precise and few unnecessary movements. In addition, he remembered that she prepared very well for the fight. He liked her fighting style, and knew that her big sister is famous for her wild fighting style. In the afternoon the class ended, and Alexia praised his fencing style, but she also hated his style. Alexia told Zenon about her boyfriend, and Sheed understood that she accepted his love confession because she wanted to use it to annoy her marriage candidate. He later found out that Alexia didn't want to be engaged to Zenon, and that's why he became her boyfriend. She said that she knew that Sheed only confessed his love to her because he lost a bet. As a result, he was forced to continue playing her boyfriend until Zenon gave up on her. He said it would end up badly, but she bribed him with money. Suddenly he accepted the conditions to continue playing her boyfriend, and he became her dog because he needed money for his plan to be a superhero in the shadows. At that moment, he became Princess Alexia's dog, and she named him Pochi. In the following days he decided to have a romantic relationship with Alexia, and many boys were jealous at him. In addition, everyone only noticed Princess Alexia, and he was able to continue playing his role as a background boyfriend character. On the train, Alexia was frustrated, and Sheed wasn't interested in her problems at all. Afterwards, they were in the center of the capital and went for ice cream. Sheed wondered why she didn't want to marry Zenon, and he learned that Zenon only pretends to be a perfect man. Then Alexia said that she doesn't judge people based on surface but on flaws, and that she can tolerate Sheed for these reasons. Sheed was interested in Zenon's flaws, and she thanked Sheed for listening to her problems. So 2 more weeks passed, and Alexia said that his fencing style is a mystery to her. He noticed that her fencing style was different than usual, and she told him that she was trying to become as strong as her sister. Then she said she hates Sheed's fencing style because it's similar to hers. The reason for this was that her fencing style didn't match her sister's talent. Sheed cheered her up and said that her fencing style is boring but very beautiful. Suddenly Alexia became angry, and the train stopped. She said goodbye to him and got off the train. After that day, the relationship ended, and his friends tried to cheer him up. They wanted to know about his love life, but he said they never even kissed. Following this, he was surrounded by Zenon and 2 other knights of the Night Order. They accused him of kidnapping Princess Alexia and he asked him to cooperate. She'd understood that he had a big problem and he surrendered. Then Alexia woke up and she was tied up with magic sealing chains. She looked around and thought that Sheed might be the culprit. Suddenly, she heard a noise and discovered a mutated monster. Afterwards, a crazy scientist appeared who planned to take royal blood. He ignored Princess Alexia's question and he took her blood. He said that the demon will be resurrected in the modern mod and he smiled devilishly. Meanwhile, Sheed was interrogated and tortured by knights because they suspected him of being the culprit. Sheed was beaten up and he was happy because he was treated like a background character. As a result, he performed a perfect NPC show and the knights looked down on him. Sheed was bored and wondered how long they wanted to continue. After that, Alexia still wasn't found and the scientist planned to take more blood from her. She said not to take too much blood because she doesn't want to die. Then the scientist complained that his lab was being taken away from him and he yelled. Suddenly he stepped on the mutant girl, and Alexia reminded him that he planned to take her blood. The scientist got a bowl of oatmeal and he fed Alexia. She almost suffocated and the mutated girl watched her. In the days that followed, Princess Iris thanked Zenon for helping her with the investigation. Zenon was confident that they would find Alexia. Following this, Zenon reported that Sheed was unlikely to be the kidnapper, and he believed him to be innocent. Then Zenon said that all students are under lockdown, and Iris heard a commotion. The reason for this was that Claire wanted to save her little brother and caused problems. Meanwhile, Iris was wondering why her little sister had distanced herself from her. In the following days, we see Alexia, and her spirit was broken by the loss of blood. Meanwhile, Sheed was released and allowed to go home. Sheed was able to heal his wounds immediately, but he didn't because it wouldn't be consistent with the behavior of a background character. Then he got off the train and a girl whispered a message to him. When he arrived in his room, Alpha was waiting for him. She gave him a cheeseburger and she heard he was in trouble. Sheed knew that the girls had mostly normal lives, but he was grateful that they were still playing with him sometimes. Afterwards, Alpha reported to him that the cult of Diablos had kidnapped Alexia. He was surprised that she was still alive. Then Alpha said that after the case is solved, he has to take her out for burgers. Before Alpha left the room, she asked if she could eliminate the knights shadowing him. She'd said that she should just do her job and ignore the knights. Later we see Alexia, and she tried with her last strength to whisper something to the mutant girl. A few days passed, and she'd planned to celebrate this special day with an expensive wine. The reason for this was that after all the hard work, he had his Eminence and Shadow collection complete. Then he waited for Beta to arrive at his room at night. Beta saw his room, and he said that the time of the world of shadows has come and Beta played along. However, she reported to Shadow about the new members and he was shocked that he had over 100 followers among him. He was then told that the commanders had located Princess Alexia's whereabouts. Sheed stopped her and he showed Beta a letter. So he said he will take of the problem and the world is theirs tonight. Later he left his apartment and two knights made fun of him. They planned to beat up Sheed, but their dead comrades appeared behind them. Suddenly they were attacked and Sheed punished them because he wanted to take revenge on them. He transformed into Shadow and Beta admired her strong leader. Meanwhile, Delta and the other commanders began eliminating the corrupt knights, and Alpha watched the enemies from a rooftop. Princess Iris was informed that a mysterious group was attacking, and she wondered what was happening in the city. Then, Alexia talked to the mutant girl and the crazy scientist appeared again. He planned to awaken Diablos, and he injected the mutant girl with a mixture. Unfortunately, the monster was not an X-Men member, and the mutant wiped out the scientist. Suddenly she freed Princess Alexia, but the mutant lost control of her body. As a result, the mutant girl began to riot. Alexia was surprised that she had survived, but the main entrance was blocked. While looking for an exit, she met Zenon. He replied that the facility was his, and Alexia was angry because he kidnapped her. Zenon explained to her that he needed her blood to revive the devil Diablos, and he was attacked by Alexia. Unfortunately, she couldn't defeat him, but she managed to inflict a gash on him. Zenon was not impressed, and he showed her that she has no chance against him. Additionally, he said that she will never be as strong as her big sister. Out of nowhere, Shadow appeared, and they were surprised to see a man dressed in black. Following this, Zenon looked down on Shadow and he told him that he is a core member of the cult. He was confident of winning against Shadow and said that he will eliminate Shadow and show him true power. However, Shadow was attacked by Zenon and he caused an explosion. Shadow dodged his attack with ease and he asked him about the core members of the cult. Then we see Knights of the Kingdom Midgar and they tried to stop a monster who attacked the capital. But their attacks had no effect and they didn't know how they can defeat the strong enemy. Then we see Iris and she was on her way to fight the monster. Iris jumped on the monster and she managed to cut off one of the monster's arms. Suddenly the monster's body regenerated and they were shocked that Iris's attack didn't work. So Iris began to prepare a stronger attack and she cut off another arm. The monster was thrown against a wall, but she survived her powerful attacks. Iris then increased her power and attacked the monster with a finishing move. Iris planned to eliminate the monster, but Alpha appeared out of nowhere. She said that her attacks tormented the creature and she decided to put the monster out of her misery. Alpha ended the monster's life with a powerful magic attack that caused a huge explosion. Meanwhile, Iris was shocked by Alpha's explosive power. Suddenly, the monster turned back into a girl, and Alpha found a necklace with her family's picture on it. Alpha told Iris that they were Shadow Garden and warned Iris not to get in the way of their organization. Then Alpha disappeared and Iris desperately searched for her little sister. Following this, we see Shadow fighting against his opponent. His enemy tried to defeat Shadow with a large amount of magical energy. Shadow blocked all of his attacks and he ate up his sword blows like 3 Happy Meals ordered from McDonald's. Then he showed Zenon that he was no match for him and his opponent became angry. They exchanged countless sword blows and Princess Alexia was amazed by his beautiful fencing style. In the short moment, she realized that their fencing style are similar and she was amazed by him. Alexia remembered that she enjoys her fencing style the most, but she couldn't defeat her big sister with her fencing style. She remembered planning to give up, but Shadow showed her the enormous potential of her fencing style. Suddenly, Zenon was hurt, and he wanted to know why such a strong person was hiding his true identity. He replied that he belongs to the Shadow Garden, which hunts criminals from the shadows. Meanwhile, Alexia was confused and Zenon planned to take steroids that would multiply his strength. He swallowed the pills and he turned into a demon that could win a bodybuilding competition. He then said that he is one of the few who can control this power, and he will destroy him with just one hit. Zenon attacked Shadow, but his attack was not strong enough to destroy Shadow. After that, Alexia sensed Zenon's enormous power, but Shadow withstood his weak attack. He was not impressed by his opponent and began to launch a counterattack. So Zenon was beaten and he realized that he had no chance against Shadow. Suddenly he activated a spell similar to a nuclear bomb and he created a cage with his magic power. Zenon was confused and could not believe that a person who possessed infinite magical power existed. Before Shadow ended the fight, he told him a story about a man trying to survive the impact of a nuclear bomb. He said that he managed to become the power of a nuclear bomb himself, and Zenon tried to defeat him with his last strength. Unfortunately, his attack failed and Shadow prepared his atomic spell. At that moment the whole city began to shake and he caused a huge explosion. Shadow caused a disaster and his nuclear bomb spell destroyed everything in his area. Meanwhile, Shadow Garden was watching his show and Iris was worried about Alexia. In the end, a huge hole remained and Alexia was unharmed in the destroyed tunnel. At that moment she held her sword and she started doing sword exercises. She began to like her fencing style, which was elegant and beautiful. Suddenly Iris appeared and she was happy that her little sister was unharmed. Alexia hugged her big sister and she made up with her big sister. In the days that followed, Alexia met Sheed one last time and she began to have a crush on him. She thanked him for praising her fencing style. Before Sheed left, Alexia asked if he would like to continue the relationship. He refused, and he was punished by her. Later, all of his girls admired their master and they were already planning to find other members of the cult. Suddenly, Alpha said that a shadow had discovered more facilities. Additionally, she mentioned that criminals tried to ruin the reputation of their organization. They suspected that the cult of Diablos planned something and they prepared countermeasures. Meanwhile, Iris was worried because there were members of the Diablos cult in the Night Order. She also viewed Shadow Garden as a threat and planned to take countermeasures. Glenn and Marco were tasked with investigating the case and finding leads to the two organizations. Later, we see a girl reading a book. She bumped into Sheed and fell to the ground. Sheed was covered in blood and he helped her get up. In that moment, she got a crush on him, because Sheed got background character Riz. During the night, a man was chased by a mysterious person who claims to belong to the organization Shadow Garden. The next day, Sheed said he broke up with Alexia and his friends asked him if they had smooched. He replied that nothing happened and his friends planned to go to the city to buy chocolate. Later, Cherry and her father were shown an artifact that was in the possession of the cult of Diablos. Iris entrusted her with researching the artifact because she was the smartest person in the kingdom. Luther encouraged her and said that she would definitely be able to find out more about the artifact, so she agreed to take on the task, and Iris assigned the Crimson Order to protect her. Alexia wanted to help her big sister with the examinations, and she was counting on her little sister. In the afternoon, Sheed and his friends were in front of the department store. Sheed noted that the fancy architecture reminds him of his old life. Suddenly, a woman invited him to take a survey. The woman said she only needed one person, and she led Sheed into the department store. At the store, Sheed realized that the products were similar to those of his old life. He was then led to the roof of the building. He discovered a huge house built on the roof. Suddenly he entered the room, and he was greeted by Gamma. He was surprised to see Gamma, and he learned that Gamma was the store owner. Sheed remembered that he once told her about his old life. He also knew that Gamma was the smartest of the 7 shadows. But she had one major flaw, because she was very clumsy. Afterwards he sat on his custom-made throne and liked the feeling of being a king. He was grateful for Gamma's gift, and he rewarded his followers. At that moment, Gamma remembered the day Shadow had saved her life. Afterwards, he learned about the income the store had made. Sheed was shocked by the huge amount of money and sweated because of his nervousness. Then Gamma reported the incident to him that the Night Order thinks that Shadow Garden is murdering innocent people. Sheed had a plan to catch the imposter. Before he left the building, he was introduced to Nu, who was promoted to a number. Suddenly Sheed remembered that he planned to buy chocolate in her store, and he secretly stole a gold coin with his shadow abilities. Later he ran back to the dorm with his friends. He remembered Alexia trying to kill him without hesitation, but he suspected that he was on the wrong track. Suddenly, he heard the sounds of blades crossing each other. He pretended to have to go to the toilet, so he asked his friends to leave him behind so that they wouldn't get in trouble from the teachers. Then Sheed said he felt pressure in his butt because he could no longer hold the chocolate in his pants. As a result, he got rid of his friends, and he was able to search for the enemy who was posing as a member of Shadow Garden. Shadow was surprised to find Alexia, who was fighting against the enemy. Alexia managed to defeat the guy who murdered innocent peoples. Suddenly assassins appeared and Alexia tried to defeat them. She fought back, but more assassins appeared and they pretended to be Shadow Garden. Unfortunately, she was hit and suffered a serious injury. At the last moment, Shadow appeared, and he planned to punish the weaklings who pretended to be Shadow Garden. The assassins tried to escape, and Shadow planned to hunt them all down. Before he left, Alexia asked him a few questions, but he went off to hunt the assassins. However, he eliminated an enemy, and Nu showed up. She joined the hunt, and Shadow entrusted her to kill the last one. Suddenly the assassin tried to attack her, but she slashed him down. Then she said that he will be her toy. In the meantime, the core members of the cult of Diablos planned their next step. Then we see Alexia, who reported to her big sister that the killers were not Shadow Garden. She understood that Shadow Garden was hunting the cult of Diablos, but she viewed both as threats to the kingdom. In the mornings that followed, other students made fun of Sheed because some students saw him saying he had to go to the bathroom. His friends tried to cheer him up, and they asked if he still had chocolate. A short time later, Hiyoro confessed his love to a girl, but the girl was disgusted by his face. Suddenly a transgender appeared and he ordered Hiyoro to pick up the soap. In the afternoon, Po tried his luck and he thought he got infinite Riz. Meanwhile, Sheed didn't feel like giving a girl chocolate, but he gave Cherry his gift. Sheed got nuclear bomb Riz, and he surprised Cherry with his gift. In the evening, she wondered why she had been given chocolate as a gift. Her father said that it is a gift to confess his love. Suddenly Cherry blushed, and she was surprised because she had no experience with love. His father's illness then became apparent, and Cherry was worried about him. He replied that he was fine, and she was happy to have such a nice father. In the days that followed, Cherry thought about her crush. She took a chocolate and she remembered her father saying that the boy who gave her chocolate was probably waiting for an answer. So she ate the chocolate and she blushed as Sheed appeared in her thoughts. A few days later we see Sheed in school and he noticed that Nu was walking behind him. She told him that last night they captured a member of the cult of Diablos, and they found out that the core was brainwashing their members. A day before, Sheed learned that Hiyoro had registered him for the Bushi tournament. He didn't want to participate and punched his friends in the stomach because all they thought about was impressing girls. Sheed didn't want to take part in the tournament, and Nu told him that the Diablos were kidnapping cult orphans and brainwashing them into becoming members. Additionally, he learned that the Shadow Garden name was being spread to lure their organization out. Then Sheed realized that he wanted to take part in the Bushi tournament to demonstrate his role as a background character. Afterwards, she remembered her life before she was turned into a monster. She was grateful that Shadow had saved her. In the following days, the preliminary rounds of the Bushi tournament began, and Claire defeated her opponent. Meanwhile, many students were betting on the fights, and Sheed's friends lost almost all their money on the bets. They remembered that Sheed participate on the fights and wished him good luck. Then the battle of school council president Rose, the princess of the Orion Kingdom, against Sheed began. Sheed was ready to give a great performance to prove that he is the best ordinary background character. He practiced every day to get his performance flawless. A short time later, his fight started and Sheed began to attack his opponent. So he waited for the perfect time and he bit down on a bag of ketchup. He intentionally let Rose hit him and feigned serious injury. He showed his secret background character Bloody Tornado, so he was defeated, and he was proud to have shown a perfect performance as a background character. Suddenly Sheed got up again because he hadn't shown all of his secret background character techniques yet. Sheed planned to use all of his 47 background techniques, and he attacked Rose again. At that moment, he waited for the right moment again and was defeated countless times. Rose didn't understand why he didn't want to give up. Before Rose could use her strongest technique, the referee saved Sheed so he wouldn't die. Rose Orion was declared the winner, and Sheed was sad because he couldn't show all the background character techniques. Later, his friends lost their last savings, and Sheed hoped that at some point he would be able to show off his remaining background character techniques. Suddenly Cherry appeared, and Sheed didn't know who she was. She invited him to tea, and she said that she had seen his impressive fight. Then she gave her homemade cookies, and she replied that they can start as friends. Sheed was confused, and he spotted Professor Luther Barnett. He knew that the science teacher previously won the title of champion at the Bushin Festival. Therefore, Sheed was surprised that he is Cherry's father. After that, Sheed learned that Cherry is dedicated to her research, and has no friends for that reason. Luther asked Sheed to take good care of Cherry, and he just played along. In the evening, Cherry thought about Sheed, and she planned to visit Sheed in the hospital room. She remembered that Alexia was in a relationship with him, and she planned to visit her. Meanwhile, Alexia enjoyed delicious sweets and an iced coffee from Starbucks. Suddenly, Cherry appeared at her door, and Alexia asked if she wanted to come into the room. Alexia learned that Cherry likes to drink her coffee with sugar, and she enjoyed the sweet coffee. Then Alexia wondered why Cherry came to visit her. Cherry asked about the relationship status between Alexia and Sheed. Alexia told her that they broke up, and Cherry was very happy. This is how Alexia found out that Cherry had feelings for Sheed, and had been given chocolate as a gift. Alexia was shocked to hear the news, and Cherry thanked her for the coffee. 5 days passed, and Sheed was allowed to go back to school. Nothing changed in his life, and he secretly trained his grip strength. Suddenly, school council president Rose showed up in his classroom, and she was surprised to see him again. Then we see the cult of Diablos, and one of the core members activated a magical artifact. So the Midgar school was enveloped in a mysterious barrier, and Sheed noticed that something was wrong. Alexia was also allowed to go back to school, and she wondered why the school was locked down. She discovered that the employee in charge had been killed. Meanwhile, Sheed found out that he couldn't use magic, and he wondered if the other students sensed it. Sheed heard footsteps, and masked thugs appeared, posing as members of Shadow Garden. They said they would take over the school, but student council Rose refused. Following this, the enemy began to attack her, but Rose couldn't control her magic. As a result, the enemy was able to defeat her, and she was almost killed. At the last moment, Sheed played the typical background character and sacrificed his life to save Rose. Rose couldn't believe that Sheed had sacrificed his life for her, and she was horrified. The reason Sheed sacrificed his life was because he wanted to prove that he was the perfect background character. Suddenly Rose cried, and she thought that Sheed sacrificed his life because he loves her. Following this, Rose was ordered to surrender, and she was grateful that Sheed saved her life. Later, all the students were gathered in the auditorium, and they served the criminals as hostages. Sheed was an overpowered main character, and he secretly revived himself by infusing magic into his heart. As a result, he successfully managed to revive himself, and was proud that he was able to use his background character technique, 10-minute heartbreak. Afterwards, he realized that his magic was still affected, but he somehow managed to use magic. Then we see Cherry, and she found out more about the cult of Diablos' magical artifact. Cherry didn't notice that they were being attacked at school by criminals, and Rex appeared in the room. Rex introduced himself and said that he planned to take the pendant with him because his boss demanded it. Following this, he intended to kill Cherry, but Vice Commander Glenn fended off his attack. He was impressed that his opponent was able to block his attack even without magic. Then Rex learned that he was fighting Glenn, the Vice Commander of the Crimson Order, and Marco ordered Cherry to run away. Meanwhile, Sheed observed the situation and discovered that the knights outside were trying to break the barrier. He liked the event and planned to prepare for his performance as Eminence of Shadow. But one thing bothered him because the criminals didn't dress aesthetically. He complained that black clothes was his style and he got angry. Then he started killing some of the criminals, and he used his slime as a sniper to take out the enemies. Then Sheed discovered that there was a pink-haired girl in the building, and he knew that Cherry was an innocent girl. So he decided to help her, and he eliminated the enemy. Cherry was planning to go to her father's office, and Sheed was looking forward to his appearance as Shadow of Eminence. Then Cherry remembered Rex's words, and she wanted to solve the mystery of the artifact. Sheed protected her from the shadows, and she didn't realize that many enemies discovered her. Then she continued walking and she stumbled when she reached a staircase. At the last moment, Sheed caught her and gave her the artifact. Cherry was worried because he was injured, but he said he was fine. Sheed later realized that Cherry was the main character of this story arc, and he decided to assist her as a background character. Suddenly she found a book, and she learned that the artifact is called Eye of Vegapunk, which has the ability to block magic. She told Sheed that the user can program the frequency so that allies can continue to use magic. Additionally, she said that a person with infinite Riz could still use magic despite being activated. Suddenly Cherry said that she got a plan to deactivate the enemy's artifact. She told him that they need to get close enough to the enemy and that there is a tunnel under the school. Unfortunately, she didn't have the tools to decode the artifact, but Sheed offered to get her the tools. Meanwhile, Rex reported that knights have gathered outside the school. His boss wasn't interested in the knights and was angry because Rex couldn't get the artifact. Before he went off, he warned his boss that some members had been defeated. Afterwards, Rex went to look for Cherry, but his allies disappeared. He was confused and Sheed appeared in front of him. Suddenly Rex was attacked and he activated his special ability. He was sure that no one could defeat him in his magical barrier, but he had no chance against Sheed. So he was attacked, and Rex didn't have time to react. When he was in a schoolroom, he realized that Sheed was playing with him, and he didn't understand what happened. Finally, Sheed appeared out of nowhere, and he finished him off. A short time later we see Nu, and she discovered the defeated Knights of the Crimson Order. Nu sensed a person, and she was surprised to see her master Shadow. Sheed was told that only the 7 shadows were able to fight, and Gamma was the only one present, who unfortunately had no combat skills. But Gamma suspected that they would soon be able to use magic again, and Nu said that they would remain on standby without an order from Shadow. Then Nu helped her master find all the tools, and he told that he plans to neutralize an artifact. Nu was surprised to learn about the artifact, and she admired Master Shadow. Meanwhile, Iris and her knights were ready to rescue the students. Shadow Garden secretly observed the situation to wait for Shadow's orders. Then we see Cherry, and she was trying to decode the artifact to save everyone. A short time later, Cherry managed to decode the magical artifact. Following this, Cherry showed him a secret way to the auditorium of the school, and he was excited to enter the tunnel. Before they entered the tunnel, Cherry remembered when her mother was murdered in front of her. She hadn't known Luther was the murderer, and he told her that he was a good friend of her mother. Additionally, he offered her to live with him, and she was grateful that he had treated her like a daughter. She'd cheered Cherry up and said that her father would definitely be safe. Meanwhile, a student planned to attack the leader, but Rose understood that they had no chance against the enemies. Suddenly, everyone heard a loud noise, but Cherry didn't give up and tried to save everyone. The reason for this was that a student was shot by the enemies. Some students feared they would all die, but Rose said they needed to stay calm. Meanwhile, Cherry arrived at the auditorium, and she was shocked to see the students dying in front of her. She discovered the enemy's magical artifact and activated her own to save her father. At that moment the barrier was dissolved, and Rose immediately attacked an enemy to steal his weapon. All the students began to overwhelm the enemies, and the leader ordered his followers to kill the students. We then see that Rose planned to eliminate the leader before she ran out of mana. She tried to get to the leader, but many assassins stopped her. Suddenly she remembered a masked boy in her past, and she started to smile. After this, Shadow showed up. He got Riz, and Rose was surprised by his beautiful performance. He said that they are Shadow Garden, and his members said that they hunt from the shadows. So his organization's counterattack began, and the enemies had no chance against Shadow Garden. Shadow noticed that the enemy was planning to escape, and he planned to pursue them. Following this, the auditorium began to burn, and Gamma watched them on the roof. Shadow already suspected that the enemy leader caused the fire, and he disappeared. However, Iris learned that the enemies were defeated, and she immediately ran to the school. She asked Rose about the situation, and learned that Shadow Garden had defeated the enemies. Then we see Cherry in the tunnel, and she was trying to find her father. Meanwhile, the leader of the enemy was in a room in the school building. He burned important documents, and she knew that Luther was inside the costume. Luther wondered how he found out his identity, and he replied that he recognized him by his movements. Suddenly Sheed asked why a talented swordmaster would join an evil organization. He said he was suffering from an illness and learned that an artifact had the potential to cure him. That's how he met Cherry's mother, but Cherry's mother thought the artifact was dangerous and just refused to activate it. As a result, he decided to murder her, and he knew that Cherry was just as smart as her mother. She'd learned that Luther was only taking advantage of Cherry, but he believed that he had also desired a power to become the strongest one. Suddenly Sheed said that they had talked enough and they should start fighting. He intentionally lost the fight against Luther to prove his talent as a background character. Then he returned to the room as Shadow, and Luther had no idea that Sheed was actually Shadow. Luther activated the magical artifact and he thought he would become the Red Power Ranger. Unfortunately, he was wrong, and the magical artifact turned him into an ugly monster. Luther began to attack Shadow with his new power, but he was able to withstand his attacks with ease. So he decided to get serious, but Shadow showed him his overwhelming power. Luther didn't give up, and he was shocked to face a real monster. Then he said that Shadow Garden's reputation was destroyed, but his organization operated in the shadows like Batman from the start. In the end, Luther was stabbed several times by Shadow, and he looked down on his weak opponent. He ended the fight and destroyed the dangerous artifact. Afterwards, Cherry showed up, and she was shocked to see her dead father lying on the ground. Shadow didn't tell her the truth about her father and knew she would hate him. A few days later, a bounty was placed on Shadow and his organization. Alpha already suspected that Shadow played the villain to protect the world out of the shadows, and they admired their leader. Then we see Sheed at school, and Cherry wanted to see him again to say goodbye. She thanked him for his help and told him that she planned to leave the country. Sheed wished her good luck in Lagos, and she wished that she could have gotten to know him better. Before she left, Sheed asked her what goal she was pursuing, and she said it is a secret. Then Cherry left the Midgar Kingdom, and he knew that she planned to take revenge on Shadow. Since the school was half destroyed, summer break started earlier and most of the students went home. Sheed decided to stay in the capital and hide from his sister because he planned to hunt criminals from the shadows in the capital. Later he received a letter from Alpha, and he learned that his next mission will be in the sacred land of Lindworm. Meanwhile, many members of Shadow Garden were in the City of Deception, and they were getting ready for the mission. Then we see Epsilon, and she uses the magical slime to change her appearance. She remembered when Shadow showed her the magical slime and told her that she could use it to change her appearance in the shadows. We then see Shadow fighting Xenon again, but this time Beta was kidnapped. She wrote a book about him and realized she had run out of ideas to continue writing. Later, Epsilon met Beta, and she told Beta that Shadow likes her body more. They both had a crush on Shadow and competed against each other because they both wanted to be his wife. After this, Nu showed up and told them that they have received a directive from Alpha. We then see Iris and Alexia, who visited the popular department store in the capital for a shopping trip. Iris said that she was being sent as a special guest for the goddess's trial, and Alexia wanted to buy new clothes for that day. After that, Gamma learned that Alexia would also be traveling to the sacred land, and she helped her prepare for the trip. Alexia planned to buy new clothes, and Gamma immediately understood that she got a crush on a boy. However, the two princesses were shown the latest Victoria's Secret thong collection. Alexia told her sister that she wanted to buy underwear, but Iris thought it was too revealing. Alexia said that she needs this beautiful underwear to win a fight. As a result, she was able to change her sister's mind and she bought a lot of thongs. We then see the day the school was attacked, and Rose runs into the school's hospital room. She found Sheed and was happy that he was alive. He realized that he had NPC Riz, and because of that, Rose fell in love with him. A few days later, we see Sheed, who was on a train with Rose. She said that they would arrive in the sacred land soon, and he regretted taking the train because he met Rose at the station. Then Sheed was asked whether he would also take part in the goddess trial. Rose was already dreaming about their future together, but Sheed was a player and he already had a harem with several women. A few moments later he looked at flyers about the legend of Olivier, but Rose wouldn't leave him alone. Also, Rose said that they have to hide their love because she is a princess, and Sheed wanted some space. In the night, Sheed tried to avoid her, and he activated his Spider-Man powers to hide from her. The following morning, he looked at the city in the sacred land. Rose told him about a legend that in this city, the hero Olivier had cut off the left arm of the demon Diablos. Following this, Rose discovered that her favorite author Natsume had a meet and greet. Sheed learned that she is the most talented writer of the century. Suddenly, Sheed looked at the books by the famous author, and he knew all the stories. He thought that someone from his old world had been reincarnated, but he learned that Beta was the famous author. He remembered telling Beta stories from his old life because she asked for inspiration, but he didn't think she would turn all of his stories into books. Later, Rose showed that she had got a personal signing from Natsume. She asked Sheed what was written in his book, and he discovered that Beta left him a message in Japanese kanjis. As a result, Sheed learned that something exciting was about to happen. Then we see Alpha. She planned to find out the truth about great hero Olivier, and search for information. She wondered what the hero Olivier really do at the place that called the sanctuary. Alpha found out that the hero Olivier was hiding something, and she knew that soon a door will open. Meanwhile, Sheed was at the highest point in the city, and he was enjoying the view. Suddenly, he discovered an assassin who belonged to the cult of Diablos. He pursued him, and the enemy tried to attack Sheed, but he blocked his attack with a piece of wood. Then Epsilon showed up, and he asked what she knew about the mission. She reported to Sheed that the target has been eliminated by the cult's executioner, and they managed to take out their henchmen. Then Sheed told Epsilon that he will proceed with his own plans. The following day, we see Sheed undressing and looking forward to his bath in the hot springs. Then he got into the hot spring, and Alexia was shocked to see her crush Sheed. He ignored her and enjoyed his bath in the hot springs. Meanwhile, Alexia wondered if he noticed her, and she was shocked that he could stay so calm. Then Sheed learned that she was a special guest for the goddess's trial. This is how Sheed learned that ancient warriors would appear at the goddess trial. Additionally, Alexia said that she will not participate in the goddess trial, and she tried to get Sheed to join the Crimson Knights, but he refused. Afterwards, Sheed told her to stop looking at his big Excalibur. She said his sword was tiny, but he showed Alexia that he was the reincarnation of Johnny's sins. Because of this, he showed Alexia his great skills, and Alexia was amazed by him. A few days later, we see Archbishop Jack, and he announced the goddess trial. He said that Goddess Beatrix blessed Olivier with powers to defeat the demon Diablos. Alexia hated Jack because she was sent to the Sacred Land to investigate the Archbishop's death. But Jack was the new Archbishop, and she was annoyed by the order not to do anything because she traveled to the Sacred Land for several days for nothing. Then she noticed that all the men were cheering for Beta, and she was jealous of her big boobs. Beta knew Alexia was staring at her, and Beta didn't like her. The reason for this was that Beta was jealous, that she was in a relationship with her beloved Master Shadow. Beta got a crush on Sheed and wished he had confessed his love to her. Suddenly, Alexia got angry because Beta was looking down on her, and she steps on her foot. Meanwhile, Rose didn't even notice that the two girls were arguing. Then, the goddess trial began, and Jack announced the start of the special event. He activated a protective barrier and opened the sanctuary door to summon strong ancient warriors. However, the goddess trial started, and everyone was excited to fight against the ancient warriors. Meanwhile, Sheed overheard the background characters talking and wondered if there was a chance he could put on a great show as Eminence in Shadow. A short time later, the next challenger was called because no ancient warrior showed up. Sheed also wanted to fight against strong ancient warriors to put on a great show as Shadow. He then wondered where Alpha was, and she infiltrated the city with the other members of Shadow Garden. In the evening, Sheed was bored because no one managed to summon an ancient warrior. Suddenly his name was announced as a challenger, and everyone was surprised to hear his name. Sheed was shocked about the announcement and thought about options to avoid being punished. As a result, he chose option 3 and he distracted the audience with a spirit ball. Following this, he appeared as Shadow, and they were all shocked to see the most wanted man in the kingdom. He introduced himself to the audience as Shadow, and Jack belonged to the cult of Diablos. He said that Shadow would regret showing up at the dome, and he unleashed his powers. At that moment, a portal opened, and Jack didn't understand what was happening. Sheed was impressed, and an ancient warrior appeared in the sky in front of him. Beta said that Aurora is the Witch of Calamity, and she once rained chaos and destruction down their world. However, she knew that Jack knew more about the witch Aurora, and she seduced him so that he would answer all her questions. Alexia and Rose were disgusted with Jack, and he told them everything he knew about Aurora. Sheed sensed that Aurora was similar to him, and he knew that their fight would feel like a conversation. Suddenly, she started attacking Sheed, and he enjoyed dodging her strong attacks. Beta noticed that Shadow could dodge all of her attacks, and Alexia knew that no ordinary Dark Knight would be able to dodge Aurora's powerful spells. Then Sheed smiled, and he had a lot of fun in his fight against Witch Aurora. He was grateful that he was able to meet her, and was sad that he had to end the fight. So Sheed began to initiate a counterattack, and he defeated Aurora with a single attack. Aurora was defeated by Shadow, and he knew that Aurora couldn't use her full powers. Finally, Shadow disappeared, and everyone was shocked that he had won against a monster. A short time later, a magical circle activated that opened a door to the sacred land. Alpha was already waiting for this moment, and she suspected that Shadow was the key to the door. Then we see Sheed. He was on the roof of the dome, and discovered a huge door. He looked at the magic circle, and he realized that the magic was chasing him. Unfortunately, he couldn't escape the magical door, and he felt that he would have a lot of fun if he entered it. A short time before, the audience also saw the magical door, and Jack was surprised that the sanctuary responded to Shadow. He then explained that the gate normally only opens once a year, and they only respond to people who have the right to pass through it. Following this, the goddess trial was cancelled, and Alexia sensed enemies. Jack realized that Shadow Garden had appeared, and they said that nothing will happen to them as long as they don't move. Epsilon defeated all of the church's guards, and Alpha went with Delta towards the portal. Meanwhile, Alexia sensed that Alpha is very strong, and they entered the sanctuary door. Jack said that they were not allowed to enter the sanctuary, but Epsilon ordered them not to do anything until the door was closed. Then Epsilon prioritized her mission to take Jack into the portal. Suddenly, an assassin appeared and cut off Epsilon's fake boobs. She was angry, and she didn't want to reveal that her breast size was A. As a result, she defeated the enemy, and she wanted to kill Jack immediately. Alexia and Rose didn't understand why Epsilon was angry, and they took Beta into the portal. Suddenly the portal closed, but Alexia also jumped into the sanctuary. However, Rose followed her, and Beta was surprised to see the two girls. Afterwards, Beta argued with Alexia because her hand was on her breasts, and Alpha showed up. Alpha looked at them and said that they can do whatever they want. Following this, Alpha said that they planned to find out the truth about the sanctuary. She knew that Jack wouldn't reveal anything about the cult of Diablos, and they discovered a statue of Olivier. Alexia was surprised that Olivier was a woman, and Alpha wanted an answer why Olivier looks exactly like her. Shadow Garden already suspected that the cult of Diablos were up to something big, and they opened a door to find out the truth. Jack was shocked because she was able to open the secret door, and water came out of the room. In the same time, Alpha said that they were entering a graveyard of Olivier's memories. Meanwhile, Sheed met Aurora, and she replied that she enjoyed her fight with him. Sheed said he had fun too, and Aurora wished they had lived in the same era. Before he looked for a way out, Aurora asked if he could free her. Sheed thought that tying herself up was part of her training, but she cleared up the misunderstanding. As a result, they decided to find a way out together. She remembered that the dimension is a huge prison where they can't use magic. Suddenly Sheed said that he will somehow manage to destroy the prison, and he believed that he will find a way out. Meanwhile, Alpha's group arrived at a laboratory. She said that these were Olivier's memories. So we see that the cult of Diablos kidnaps children to carry out cruel experiments on them. Then we see Sheed and Aurora said that they are inside a memory. He wondered why a little girl who looked exactly like Aurora was crying. Aurora slapped the little girl and said that crying wouldn't change anything. Afterwards, Alpha explained that Olivier was one of the few who were compatible with the Diablos cells. She said that the cult tried to implant demon cells into children's. Additionally, she said that Olivier was actually on a mission to get new Diablos cells. Jack refused to admit the truth, and they saw more memories. Then they see that Diablos' arm was cut off, but the severed arm still caused problems. For this reason, powerful ancient artifacts were used to seal the arm of Diablos. Alpha said the true goal of the Diablos cult was to access the massive life force of the Diablos cells. She explained that their goal was failed because the supplements had side effects, and they discovered that Jack was on the research team. He had made a special item that tasted like Mr. Beast D's nuts, and Alpha asked for the name. So Alpha learned that Jack's research team called the item Bead of Diablos, and they tasted better than Logan Paul's prime drink. Alpha believed that the Bead of Diablos had two major flaws, and Alexia made fun of Jack for being bald. Alpha said that the Bead of Diablos needs to take in regularly, and she suspected that only the highest-ranking members of the cult receive them. Suddenly he was killed by Delta and she threw him into a river. Alpha knew Jack wasn't dead yet, and he turned into a disgusting monster. Suddenly they were teleported to another dimension, and they were separated from Epsilon and the other members. Meanwhile, Jack was confident that he will win, and he created clones of himself, which made Delta angry. So she attacked all the clones of Jack, but more and more clones appeared and tried to murder her. However, Jack explained that the room was absorbing their magic power, and Delta planned to kill all newly created clones. Then we see Aurora, and she was wondering why Sheed was doing nonsense in the dark room. Suddenly they were teleported to a battlefield, and he said that she was heavy. Aurora helped him to get up, and they continued trying to find a way out of the sanctuary. Afterwards, Sheed wondered why she was seen as a crying child again. Aurora took a sword in her hand, and she intended to kill her past self. Suddenly she was attacked by zombies, and Sheed saved her from the monsters. They noticed that more and more zombies were appearing, and they were considered a virus in the system. Following this, we see Epsilon, and she looked at the surroundings with her team. She spotted a monster, and her commanders were ready for battle. Epsilon stopped their members and told them not to worry. As a result, the monster turned into a girl, and she explained to her members that they are just memories. She understood that the sanctuary responded to the members of Shadow Garden, and she would have lived that life too if Shadow hadn't saved them. Then Epsilon's team planned to take the information about the victims of the experiments, and they used a Canon camera to take pictures. Suddenly, they could no longer control their magic power, and Epsilon forced her members to keep the secret that her breasts were fake. Later, Sheed fought the zombies with Aurora, and she was surprised that he could easily defeat the zombies without magic. He replied that he did bodybuilding in his free time and learned a lot of martial arts. Then Sheed decided to go to the next room, and he felt sorry that he had to kill Aurora's past self. When they arrived at the center of the sanctuary, the two discovered a magical sword that was sealed. Meanwhile, Delta was still fighting Jack, and he couldn't believe that her magic wasn't completely absorbed. She defeated all of Jack's clones, and he was shocked because he realized that she could control their mana with a special technique. Jack thought he just had to create more clones to win, but Delta was the reincarnation of Vegeta from Dragon Ball Super. After this, we see Sheed, and it was explained to him that the sealed door must be destroyed in order to get to the magic core behind it. He knew immediately that his sword was not suitable to destroy the chains. Aurora replied that they can destroy the chains with the sword stuck on the ground. Unfortunately, Sheed knew that he was not authorized to pull out the sword. Following this, Alexia doubted that Delta belongs to Shadow Garden because her fighting style is not at all similar to Shadow. She said that she is strong but fights like a wild animal. Suddenly they were teleported back to another room, and Jack was shocked because Delta had defeated over hundreds of clones of him. Suddenly Jack became desperate, and he knew he had to play his last trump card. He activated a magic circle, and the legendary heroine Olivier appeared in the room. She looked like Alpha, and Jack was sure that with the help of Olivier, he will win. Meanwhile, Epsilon showed up with her team, and she said that they had finished the investigation. Alpha was pleased to hear her words, and she planned to retreat with her team. Before she left, she told Jack that her goal was to cut off the source of power. So Shadow Garden opened a portal, and the girls all left the sanctuary. Then he was alarmed about intruders, and he was afraid of encountering a monster like Delta again. For this reason, he ordered Olivier to accompany him. Meanwhile, Sheed learned that Aurora will disappear after the core is destroyed. Suddenly a portal opened, and Jack appeared. Sheed remembered seeing the bald man somewhere, and he was surprised that Olivier looked like Alpha. Meanwhile, Jack looked down on the two and said that they will never be able to destroy the sealed door. He said they were going to die, and heroine Olivier ran towards them. But Sheed wasn't afraid, and he planned to fight them. Aurora thought Sheed would lose, but he planned to play with her, so he let himself be hit on purpose to test her strength. Jack wondered why he was smiling, and he knew he had found a strong opponent. Olivier began attacking Sheed again, and she managed to inflict a fatal injury on him. Suddenly, Sheed said that the girl in front of him has no heart because she doesn't respond to his requests. Aurora wanted to stop the fight, and she explained to him that he cannot defeat the heroine Olivier. She thought that Sheed was trying to destroy the core out of love for her, and he was confused. Following this, Aurora tried to convince Jack to spare Sheed's life, but he said that he will easily win the fight. Jack became angry and ordered Olivier to kill him. Sheed began to smile because he had lured Olivier into his trap. The reason for this was that he planned to do a move like Mike Tyson, and he bit off a piece of heroine Olivier's neck. Aurora was shocked that she'd managed to defeat the strongest heroine in history. Olivier's body disappeared, and Sheed began to smile. Jack then asked why he was still alive, and he explained that he could move his organs around his body to prevent fatal attacks. He also explained to Jack that there is a point on humans' necks to kill any person instantly. Jack made fun of him and told him that heroine Olivier is just one copy of many. So he activated a spell, and he ordered an entire army made up of copies of heroine Olivier to attack. Unfortunately, Sheed was not impressed, and he began to unleash his magic. Jack was shocked because Sheed wasn't supposed to be able to control his magic, but he used magic to create a sword. However, he replied that he could use his magic all the time and was just playing with Jack. Afterwards, Sheed began fighting the other Oliviers, and Jack thought he could win. Sheed ignored him, and Aurora realized that he planned to wipe out the entire sanctuary to destroy the core. Following this, he prepared his spell, and Aurora couldn't believe that any person could possess infinite magical energy. Sheed activated his spell, and it caused an explosion more powerful than a nuclear bomb. As a result, the sanctuary exploded, and Shadow Garden knew that Shadow caused it. Alexia and Rose were shocked too, and they couldn't believe what was happening in front of them. Meanwhile, the arm of Diablos was freed, and Sheed prepared to destroy it. A short time later, he was back in the real world, and Aurora noticed that she was disappearing. Aurora told him that she was calling him, and she apologized for lying to him. He wasn't angry, and Aurora thanked him for saving her. Before she completely disappeared, she whispered a message in his ear. Then we see Alexia, and she asked Rose if she wasn't frustrated. She said that they couldn't do anything except watch the fight as background characters. Suddenly, Beta asked what Alexia was planning to do, and she replied that the three of them should work together to gather information. She wanted to use the information to build an organization strong enough to learn the truth about the world. Beta and Rose joined her team, and they planned to work together. In the following morning, Alpha was informed that the magical sword and the core had been vaporized. It was also reported to her that Beta is guiding the princess to infiltrate the Crimson's Order's inner circle. Additionally, Alpha learned that the witch Aurora was also known as the demon Diablos. Later we see Gamma, who was planning to buy a property in the Bagalta Empire. The real estate agent tried to convince her to buy the property, and she used her business skills to get the property for a cheap price. Then Nu showed up and told her that they had finished all the preparations, and Gamma agreed to buy the property. Additionally, she said that she will buy every property on this street, and the real estate agent was surprised. A few days later, the other core members of Shadow Garden were all waiting for Alpha's return to the base. Shortly after, Alpha returned to the base, and she remembered the day she showed Sheed their base. He liked the family atmosphere, and Alpha talked about her plan to destroy the cult of Diablos. That day, Sheed said he will help them with her plan, and he will teach the girls fighting techniques so they can defend themselves. Then we see Alexia, who was at a spa with her big sister. She reported to Iris about the events in the sacred land. Following this, Alexia suggests that they needs to investigate the divine teachings. Suddenly, Iris mentioned that this year's Bushin Festival will be an important role, because winning will give them more backing from the Night Order. Alexia understood her plan, but she feared that Shadow Garden might get in their way. Iris told her little sister that she planned to win the Bushin Festival at all costs. After this, Alexia was asked why she followed Shadow Garden, and she avoided talking about the topic. Following this, Iris was ashamed because the Night Order no longer trusted her, and countless talented knights died under her leadership. Meanwhile, Rose was training her swordsmanship, and she was not satisfied because she couldn't imitate Shadow's attack back then. Suddenly she felt a pain in her chest, and she realized that something was wrong with her body. A few weeks later, Sheed observed from a tower that many strong warriors had gathered in the capital for the Bushin Festival. He was excited, and many strong Black Knights planned to win the Bushin Festival in the capital. Sheed knew that many powerful nobles and spectators would be cheering on the fighters. As a result, he planned to enter the tournament and pretend to be a weakling in order to reveal his true strength just before losing. In the afternoon, Gamma entered her mansion, and she was happy to see her master. Unfortunately, she stumbled, and Sheed said that he was planning to disguise himself and enter the Bushin Festival. Gamma asked why he didn't want to reveal his identity, but Sheed replied that it was a secret. Following this, Gamma showed him a cream that worked similarly to the slime that all shadows use for their clothing. He was surprised by the slime item, and she asked what identity he wanted. So Sheed replied that he wanted to look weak, and Gamma suggested Jimmy Neutron to him. He liked her idea to choose Jimmy, and Gamma activated a crazy machine that changed his appearance. As a result, he looked like a weak person, and he contorted his body to look even weaker. He knew that Gamma was a genius, but she still has absolutely no athletic abilities. In the following day, Anaros, who summoned an ancient warrior at the last goddess's trial, was in the capital. She discovered Sheed, and gave him the advice to forget entering the Bushi festival. He replied that she shouldn't judge him and smiled, because his plan worked. Suddenly, a strong warrior appeared, and Quentin told Jimmy that he got no chance in the Bushi festival. Sheed said he was stronger than him, and he was beaten up by Quentin. Sheed saw that Quentin is an amateur, and he found several options to kill the gorilla in front of him. But it was written on his bucket list that he wanted to win the tournament as an unexpected newbie. For this reason, he didn't fight back, and he let Quentin beat him up. Then Anaros stopped Quentin, and everyone thought that Jimmy was a weakling. Anaros was able to stop the fight, but she didn't because she wanted to show Jimmy that the Bushi festival could get even more painful. Suddenly she realized that Jimmy was unharmed, and she understood that he was not a weakling. A short time later he planned to register for the Bushi festival, and everyone thought he was a weirdo. Then he ordered a burger at Four Guys, and he planned to show his true eminent power when the tournament is really reaching its climax. Hiyoro planned to bet on the fights, and he asked him to borrow him money. Sheed showed Hiyoro a pendant, and he walked away because he didn't want to lend him money. In the evening he went home with a bag of cheeseburgers, and Rose appeared behind him. She said she went to Four Guys with her friends a few days ago, and the food was delicious. Following this, Sheed learned that they planned to make the world a better place. Suddenly she told him that she will soon see her father, and he's going to introduce her to her future fiancé. Afterward she said that she was the princess of the land of art and culture. She told him that she was saved by a masked hero in her childhood, and since then she wanted to learn the path of sword. In the end she told Sheed that she had chosen a path that no one would tolerate. Sheed said goodbye, and he gave her his last cheeseburger. The next day the preliminary rounds started, and Yoro said that he was collecting data on the battles. He begged Sheed to lend him money, and Golden Gill, the unbeaten legend, appeared behind them. Then Golden Gill said that he will win the Bushi festival because he can calculate the power levels of the fighters. After that, the fight of Jimmy was announced, and Golden Gill said that the bodybuilder has a power level of 1300. Hiyoro believed Gill's lies, and he told him that Jimmy is very weak. Suddenly Gonzalez was defeated, and everyone didn't want to accept the result. The reason for this was that Sheed had defeated the enemy at the speed of light, and only Anaros was able to see the blow. Following this, Gill said that he will easily defeat Jimmy in the main event. Sheed returned, and Hiyoro didn't even notice that Sheed was gone. Meanwhile, he noticed that Anaros was able to follow his movements, and he was looking forward to the tournament. In the followed morning, Hiyoro showed up at his door, and he had to tell him something important. Sheed learned that Rose stabbed her fiancé with a knife and she ran off. Meanwhile, Beta and Alexia found out about the news. They learned that the Oriana Kingdom wanted to handle the matter internally and asked the Midgar Kingdom not to interfere. Alexia found the actions of Kingdom Oriana suspicious, and Rose was on the run from the knights who were hunting her. Following this, Alexia planned to find Rose, but Beta believed she didn't say anything to them because Rose didn't want to cause them any problems. Alexia didn't want to let her friend down, and she was angry. The reason for this was because they vowed to work as a team, and she told Beta that she doesn't plan to abandon their friend Rose. Then Alexia said that she will ask her sister for advice, and Beta planned to feed her some information to slow her down. Afterwards, she was told about Rose's whereabouts, and she believed that the cult of Diablos was behind it. In the afternoon, Sheed was reading the newspaper, and Hiyoro was nervous because he was betting on the fights. Sheed believed that there was a big event, and he planned to deliver a great performance as Eminence in Shadow. Suddenly, Sheed went to prepare for his fight, and he met an elf on his way to the toilet. She told him that she was looking for an elf, and she told him that she should look a lot like her. Then Beatrix revealed her face, and Sheed was surprised to meet the aunt of Alpha. Suddenly he was attacked, but he knew that she was going to stop right in time. As a result, he pretended to be a weak background character. Beatrix said sorry, because she could sense his power, and was surprised that he couldn't dodge her attack. Then we see Quentin, and he asked Anaros if she was watching the third round yesterday. She was asked about the fight of Jimmy, and they both were sure that his victory didn't look like luck. Suddenly Anaros told him that she never expected anyone to be fast enough that her eyes couldn't follow the movements, but it seemed that his right hand moved. Afterwards, Golden Gill's fight began, and Anaros said that he is undefeated because he never fights an opponent stronger than him. Following this, Quentin was looking forward to the fight because he wanted to find out whether Jimmy was using an artifact or just hiding his true powers. A short time later, the fight started and Jimmy dodged the attack. He casted an illusion on Gil and his opponent sensed the danger. Then Anaros said that Jimmy is not a normal person and he cracked his neck to dodge Gil's attack. Quentin didn't understand his technique and Anaros was confused herself. In the meantime, Gil was angry at Jimmy and he thought that his opponent was looking down on him. Gil couldn't believe that a weakling of power level 10 thinks he can humiliate him, and he launched a strong attack. He said that his strength level was over 4,000, but Jimmy defeated him by accidentally sneezing on him. However, everyone was shocked by the result, and Jimmy was declared the winner of the fight. Quentin didn't know what happened, and Anaros explained to him that he just sneezed on his opponent. She told him that Jimmy had pointed his sword at Gil while he was sneezing. He was shocked, and Quentin thought that she was just kidding. After this, she tried to copy his technique, and she started to crack her neck several times. Later, Iris told Lord Percy about the security plan for the main Bushi festival tournament next week. She asked the King of Oriana if he was sure he didn't want to increase security. Lord Percy replied that he was not worried, and she noticed that the king was acting like a puppet. Later, Sheed defeated his next opponent and everyone couldn't believe that a weakling like him won all of his fights. The audience couldn't figure out how he is winning and they were confused. Meanwhile, Hiro lost all of his bets in the Bushi festival and no one wanted to lend him money. After the fight against Quentin, he went to the toilets, but on the way he met Anaros. She warned him and told Jimmy that she could see his every move and that he shouldn't expect to win his fight against her. Sheed smiled because he was perfectly prepared for such a moment. Then he said that he had the weights or chains that hold him back, and Anaros was stunned. She thought she had seen through his trick, and Sheed was wondering why she cracked her neck. Later we see Rose, and she was hunted by a group of black knights. She made sure not to hit their vital points and tried to escape. In the followed morning, Sheed remembered his last fight and he realized that he needed an own slogan. He couldn't think of a good slogan to say to his opponents in battle. Then Hiro appeared at his door and he wanted to tell him something important. Following this, he told him that there was a bounty on Rose's head and he wanted to get the 500 million berries. Sheed wasn't interested and he would have liked to have watched her stab her fiancé. Suddenly he spotted his sister, and he immediately got dressed to escape from Claire. He jumped out the window with Hiro, and Claire rang his doorbell. Then we see Sheed again, and he would have liked to ask Rose in person what inspired her to stab her fiancé. Suddenly he heard a person playing piano, and he remembered his previous life when he was forced to learn to play piano. Sheed didn't think it was a bad idea to learn to play the piano because it fit perfectly into his Eminence of Shadow plan. As a result, he learned to play many famous piano pieces, and had a lot of fun doing them. After this he realized that the person was playing Beethoven's Piano Sonata No. 14, and he became curious. He thought that a person like him was also reincarnated into this world, but he found out that the person was Epsilon. As a result, he was disappointed, and she told him that she was surprised to see him. Despite this, Sheed was happy that Epsilon was having fun, but he was shocked that she was seen as a talented composer. She told him that she was invited to the Oriana Kingdom, and he asked if she had any information about Rose's incident. Afterwards, he wished her a lot of fun in the Oriana Kingdom and left the room. He discovered a piano and wanted to play it. In the meantime, Beta told Alexia that Lord Percy is working with the cult. She planned to slow Alexia down in her investigation about Rose. However, they went into an underground tunnel, and they searched for clues to find Rose. Beta wanted to go back to the city, but Alexia refused, and she was annoyed to babysit Alexia. Then we see Rose, and she was wondering if she had made the right decision. She remembered the day when she met her father again after a long time. However, she realized that her father had become a zombie who had sipped way too much of purple drink. Rose decided to kill Lord Percy to save her father, but Percy already controlled all the nobles. As a result, a bounty was placed on her head, and she knew she should solve the problem differently. Then she remembered that Lord Percy said she should turn herself in before the Bushi festival is over, otherwise he will make her father to cause a war. Rose wanted to protect her father, but she didn't know how to stop Percy. She had wished to marry Sheed, but unfortunately, she was possessed, and she knew that her wish could not come true. Suddenly the curse activated on her, and she knew that she barely had time to live. She thought that the cult of Diablos will win, and she can't do anything. At the last moment, she heard Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. So she followed the sound of the piano's melody, and she spotted Shadow. She was surprised to see Shadow sitting in front of her playing wonderful music. Additionally, she was surprised that Shadow is a talented musician who resembles a god. Suddenly Shadow asked what did she hope to accomplish, and she replied that she wanted to protect everyone. Shadow offered to give her power, and she learned that she could use it to change the future. As a result, she was cured of her curse, and it gave her a new power that gave her the ability to save her kingdom. After Shadow disappeared, assassins from the cult appeared and they attacked Rose. Rose decided to join Shadow Garden and used her new gained power to defeat them. In the meantime, Alexia could sense an enormous burst of magical power. Suddenly Rose appeared, and she said that she obtained power. She didn't want to tell Alexia about her plan because she didn't want to endanger her life. Alexia replied that they made a promise to each other, but Rose just said sorry. Then she wanted to leave, but Alexia attacked Rose because she was disappointed in her friend for being treated like a spectator. The two girls fought against each other, and Rose easily defeated her. Rose showed her the new power that she obtained by Master Shadow, and she unleashed a powerful shockwave. A short time later, Alexia was defeated, and Beta said that she won't stop Rose. She wished her good luck on her mission, and she wondered what her Master Shadow was planning. Following this, we see Sheed on his way home, and he was shocked to see his sister Claire. A few moments later, Claire told him while she was waiting for him in front of his dorm. She was beating him into a bloody pulp in her mind. Then Claire said that he promised her that they would go back home together during the summer holidays. Sheed said he didn't remember the promise, and Claire gave him one last chance. He was forced to watch her fight at the Bushi festival, and he promised to go see her fight. In the next morning, Alexia learned that Beta would be spending a while abroad, doing research. She looked around the room and saw a letter with information about the Oriana Kingdom. She knew Beta didn't like her, and was grateful that she had helped her in the end. We then see Sheed, and he was led to his seat in the VIP lounge. He met Iris in the VIP lounge, and he was surprised that she knew her big sister. Then he thought he was in the wrong seat, but Iris stopped him, and she was happy to meet a friend of her little sister. After this, Iris said sorry for all the trouble she caused during the Xenon Griffey incident. Iris hoped that they could continue to be friends, and he told Iris that their relationship was more like a master with a dog. Then Iris said that she has her eye on Anaros because she was able to easily defeat all opponents in her fights. Iris said that despite her strength, she doesn't plan on losing, and Sheed asked if any other figures are worth watching. Suddenly Iris said that there was one more person, Beatrix, who was not taking part in the tournament. Sheed was surprised that Beatrix is famous, and he left the room because he had to change for his fight. After this, he sensed that someone strong is nearby, and Beatrix appeared behind him. Sheed told her that he hadn't seen an elf before, and he learned that Beatrix also likes cheeseburgers. Meanwhile, Lord Percy showed up in the VIP lounge and he tried to seduce Iris with his sugar daddy Riz. Iris was surprised that the king did not accompany him and told her lies. He also asked if her father, King Klaus, would watch the tournament. Then the two discovered Anaros, and they both planned to recruit strong black knights for their kingdoms. Percy asked what Iris thought of Jimmy, and she thought that Jimmy looked weak, but his eyes said otherwise. Lord Percy thought she was just kidding, and he couldn't imagine that a weak guy like Jimmy could defeat the talented Anaros. Then the fight between Jimmy and Anaros was announced, and Percy was sure that Anaros will win. Meanwhile, Anaros wondered if she will manage to find out the secret of his technique. She knew Jimmy hadn't shown his full strength yet, but she could see he was moving like a newbie. So she started her attack against Jimmy, and she thought that she can win against him with her sword skills. Jimmy dodged her attack, and he said that she fell for his trap. At that moment, he opened the 8 inner gates, and he managed to smack Anaros in the air. She knew that her opponent was very dangerous, and she had no other option than to wait for a counterattack. Then Anaros waited, and Sheed already suspected her plan to wait for his attack. Sheed stopped the fight, and Anaros, one of the favorites of the tournament, was defeated by Jimmy. Meanwhile, Iris and Percy were surprised that no one had ever heard of Jimmy before. They were impressed, but Iris believed that she will defeat him in their fight. Then Iris went to prepare for her matches, and Percy left the VIP lounge too. He suspected that Jimmy was a citizen of the underworld, and feared that he was connected to Shadow Garden. Meanwhile, Anaros congratulated Jimmy on his victory, and she was happy to have met him at the Bushi festival. Then Jimmy was asked about his true identity, because she suspected that he must be a famous warrior, but Jimmy went off and he said that his nickname is Johnny Sins. Later, one of Iris's opponents was defeated, and everyone in the audience celebrated her victory. Beatrix watched her fight, and Iris immediately ran after her. The reason for this was that she was a big fan of hers, and Beatrix offered her a cheeseburger. However, Beatrix told her that cheeseburgers are her favorite meals to build muscles. In the evening, we see Sheed, and his plan was to defeat Iris. He had many stupid ideas, and he was excited for the fight tomorrow. Then he learned that Claire was waiting for him because she planned to punish him for not watching her fight. Then we see Rose, and she planned to use her new gained power to save her kingdom. She was ready for tomorrow and hoped everything would work out. In the meantime, Iris was practicing her sword skills, and she remembered when she defeated a commander with one blow as a little child. Since then, she won many battles and was considered a genius of the Midgar kingdom. Iris was admired by many people, but she was constantly treated differently because she was the princess of Midgar. Iris was not respected by her father, and he did not allow her to have any say in the security of the kingdom. As a result, Iris planned to win the Bushi festival to prove that she has enough power to protect the kingdom. In the day that followed, Sheed was enjoying the free snacks in the VIP lounge. Suddenly Iris appeared, and she told him that she didn't like coffee because of the bitter flavor. Sheed gave her the advice to mix coffee with milk and sugar, and she was surprised that it worked. Meanwhile, Beatrix showed up in the VIP room, and Iris invited her to the room. They were surprised, and Sheed admired her, because she got the title War Goddess. Later, Beatrix was asked if a person caught her attention, but she answered Sheed. She said that Sheed can definitely become a powerful Black Knight. Then we see that Percy poisoned the King of Oriana, and he didn't intend to kill him because Percy knew Rose would fall for his bait. Percy planned to exploit Rose because she was prime material for the cult's experimentation. Also, Percy planned to kill the King of Midgar because he wanted to cause a war. Suddenly, Beatrix said that Percy stinks, and he ordered guards to throw her out of the room. Iris cleared up the misunderstanding, and he was shocked to meet the woman who may have awakened the hero's blood. However, Percy was worried that his plan would be prevented because he had no chance against the goddess of war. But Percy was sure that Rose would show up, and he planned to use the moment to murder the King of Midgar. Meanwhile, Claire was fighting, and he didn't see her as a threat. Iris was on her way to her fight against Jimmy, and she couldn't allow herself to lose in the fight. After this, Iris stood in front of Jimmy, and she felt that he was a very strong fighter who didn't win with luck. She looked at him and planned to attack him immediately. After the fight began, she felt her head being cut off and she lost consciousness. Claire knew that Sheed hadn't seen her fight and she planned to punish her little brother. Then we see Iris dodging an attack, and she realized she was still alive. She was confused by his attack and didn't understand what just happened. After Iris regained her senses, one of her legs was cut off by Jimmy's powerful illusion spell. Meanwhile, Rose had almost reached the VIP seats, but she discovered many dead cult members. She already suspected that Shadow Garden was behind it, and she was told to fulfill her mission. Iris was still fighting Jimmy, and she couldn't escape his illusion's attacks. She understood that her opponent was the most powerful person in the world. Unfortunately, Iris couldn't allow herself to lose the fight, and she immediately unleashed all of her power. She rushed towards Jimmy, and she was confused because his sword disappeared. In this moment, she realized that she had fallen into his trap, and Jimmy countered her attack. He defeated Iris, and she was shocked that Jimmy had only been playing with her the whole time. The King of Midgar was disappointed in his daughter, and Percy couldn't believe that Iris was defeated. Beatrix was impressed by Jimmy, and she wanted to fight against him too. Suddenly Rose appeared in the room, and Percy smiled, because everything was going according to his plan. Rose apologized for making mistakes and told him that she would continue to make mistakes. Suddenly her father replied that he will forgive Rose for all her sins. Rose was happy that her father could regain his senses for a brief moment, and she murdered him. Before the King of Oriana died, he said that she loves his daughter. Following this, Rose decided to end her life, but Jimmy showed up to save her. He defeated all the assassins, and Rose realized that Jimmy was the hero who saved her in her childhood. He transformed into Shadow, but Rose called him Stylish Bandit Slayer. So Rose messed up his performance, and they didn't know who the Stylish Bandit Slayer was. She admired him, and she remembered the day she was kidnapped by bandits. On that day, a hero showed up, and Sheed introduced himself as Stylish Bandit Slayer. He said that her fight is not over, and she decided to survive to save her kingdom out of the shadows. Percy tried to call his guard reinforcements, but the Shadow Garden members eliminated them. Suddenly, Shadow was attacked by Beatrix because she really wanted to fight him. Iris was shocked that the person who defeated her in the match was Shadow. He destroyed the building and began fighting Beatrix on the roof. Then we see the King of Midgar, who is reported that there is a fight in the arena. Additionally, it was reported that Percy is on his way to Kingdom of Oriana, and Claire was looking for her little brother. Meanwhile, Shadow withstood Beatrix's attacks, and he planned to show her a secret technique of his. Beatrix was able to block his attack, and he smiled. He constantly appeared out of nowhere behind her, and she couldn't predict his attack. Then Shadow told her that he respects her and said that she is a strong opponent. Suddenly Iris appeared, planning to fight Shadow with a legendary artifact. Shadow said that she couldn't scratch him with it, and Iris attacked him with the sword in anger. Unfortunately, she couldn't hit him, and he dodged the attacks with ease. Iris couldn't believe that her attack failed, and she tried to attack him again. He ignored her because he was attacked by Beatrix, and Iris was angry because Shadow looked down on her. Then we see Rose, who managed to escape, and Alpha appeared behind her. Shadow fought against Iris and Beatrix at the same time, and he only played with the two girls. He also wanted a weapon, and he let Iris hit him to get his favorite weapon. However, he was able to get 2 crowbars to fend off the girls' attacks. Shadow planned to show them the truth power of crowbars, and he was excited to launch his attack. So he got into position to prepare his attack with the crowbars. Meanwhile, Alpha told Rose that she got the option to fight alone or join Shadow Garden. Rose learned that Shadow Garden could help her save her kingdom. As a result, she decided to join Shadow Garden. Later, Iris asked her opponent who he is, and he replied that Shadow is his true name and form. Beatrix introduced herself, and she enjoyed the fight against Shadow. Suddenly, Shadow wanted to make a cool appearance, and he showed them another secret technique. Iris was angry at being treated like a weakling, and she tried to hit him with a fire attack. Unfortunately, Iris was no match for Shadow, and he continued to fight with Beatrix, who managed to destroy one of his crowbars. Then we see Anna Rose, who was at the train station hoping to see Jimmy again one day. He was on the roof of the building and fought against Beatrix, who was able to block his attacks. Shadow praised Beatrix and he planned to teach Beatrix a trick, but Iris attacked him from behind. In that moment, he wondered if both siblings were wild animals, and he told Iris that he cannot be defeated with borrowed power. Iris wanted to defeat him at all costs, but Shadow wasn't impressed. He defeated her immediately and focused on Beatrix's strong attack. Suddenly, he showed the two girls his monstrous strength and stomped them to the ground. Shadow won the fight, but Iris didn't give up and she didn't want to let him escape. The reason for this was that she wanted revenge for destroying a city of the Midgar Kingdom, but Shadow just laughed, and they were confused because he was acting strange. Shadow laughed because he had no intention of running away, and he activated his nuclear bomb spell. Suddenly he was in the sky and said that playtime is over. Alexia trained her sword skills, and she wanted to become just as strong as Shadow. Following this, Iris lost her will to fight because she understood that no one could stop Shadow. He demonstrated to them the power of a god and activated his atomic bomb spell. At the last moment, he stopped his spell and the barrier disappeared. Iris realized that Shadow had disappeared too, and Beatrix liked him. Iris cried because she lost to him and could never beat him. A few days later, we see Cherry, and she wanted revenge on Shadow for killing her father. Percy said sorry because he let Rose escape, and a core member of the Diablos cult was disappointed in him. Beatrix tried to cheer Iris up, but she said everything was fine. She left the capital without finding her niece, but she was happy to have met Sheed. After this, we see the core members of Shadow Garden, who continued to admire their master. They thought that Shadow knew that the Oriana Kingdom was controlled by the cult. Meanwhile, Sheed was on the way to school, and he found out that Hyoro had a long-term job because he had to pay off debts. Sheed also learned that he had been nicknamed the Demon Shadow since his last fight. We then see Rose, who arrived in Sheed's hometown. Alpha told her that they have to cross the mountains, and they went to a secret place. In the night, they arrived in a town that was used for training Shadow Garden's newbies. Rose learned that her name would be number 666, and that she would have to forget her old life. She was sad, and she didn't want to forget the memories of her crush Sheed. Meanwhile, Sheed was dressed as Shadow, and he played the Moonlight Sonata of Beethoven.